Welcome to this very special edition of The Author's Voice with KAJ, a show where we explore the stories behind the stories. Here we dive into the worlds created by authors, discover their inspirations, and ensure that you walk away enriched and inspired. And today we have with us author Doug Lynam. He's also a former Marine, a monk, and a money manager. So we'll talk about a lot of that and also about his. But today we'll be talking about, he has written several books, but today we'll be talking about his book, Taming Your Money Monster, 9 Paths to Money Mastery with the Enneagram. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Thank you so much. Great to be back. Thanks for the invite.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show once again, Doug. This time on the Author's Voice with KAJ. So here we will be talking about your book. But before that, let's talk about your how you become an author. What led you to becoming an author? You had a quite busy life. So becoming an author can be the last thing one can think of. I want to understand that for the story behind becoming your author.
Oh, it was completely by accident. I mean, I've always been a book lover. I've always enjoyed reading. You know, I as a kid, I would probably read on summer breaks. I'd read a book a day if I could, you know, but I never thought of really being an author until a book deal just landed in my lap. I won the literary lottery, as they say. I had an article about me that was posted in the New York Times in the business section that went viral. And the agents from New York, one of the top book agencies, reached out and said, "Hey, do you want to do a book deal?" Actually, several reached out. And I said, well, I guess, why not? Why wouldn't I? Sure. So I became an author all of a sudden. And I had to just submit, of course, a book proposal. And I took my first stab at writing, an outline for a book and the first chapter. And they loved it. And that they then shopped that out to various publishers. And that landed with HarperCollins. And then they gave me a 2-book deal. And now I had to become an author and learn how to write.
Absolutely. And what about this particular book? Any particular thing that you wanted to highlight with this book? Or how did this book, what was the inspiration for this particular book? Let me show it here.
Yeah.
Taming Your Money Monster.
So, my first book, From Monk to Money Manager, was really about, how to manage your money and the nuts and bolts of personal finance and all that stuff. But when I got to the second book deal, it was an open-ended project. They said, okay, write anything you want. And I'm like, okay, well, what would be really compelling that would be fresh and unique that I think the world needs to hear and that I could share? And so what I was looking for was an ethical framework that would help people make better financial decisions. But that ethical framework needed to be able to transcend religion, politics, and culture. So what would that be? And I first tried using a thing called spiral dynamics and integral theory. And I spent about 2 years working on that, and it didn't work. The book worked as a concept, but when I showed the draft to my publishers, they said, no, try again. No one is going to want to read that book. It's far too complicated. So I then fell back thinking, okay, I don't want to lose this book deal. What's another framework I could try to work with? And a good friend of mine, whose name is Richard Rohr, who's been a mentor for many years, who was one of the pioneers of this system called the Enneagram, which I'm sure some of your readers or listeners have not heard of. But it's a personality typology system that it kind of explains how our egos are formed and what our defense mechanisms are and a whole bunch of other cool stuff. And I thought, well, that could really work. And so I sent my publishers a 2-sentence email saying, well, what about the Enneagram and money? Would that be something you would be interested in? And they immediately wrote back, yes, we want that book. So now I had to become an expert in the Enneagram, which I knew enough about to be dangerous, but not enough to write a book about. And so then I had to sort of go dig into that. And then 3 years later, here comes the book. And it was really exciting because I wasn't really an expert in the Enneagram to begin with. I had to sort of and I'm coming from a math science background. And so a lot of it was kind of in the woo-woo space, and a lot of it was sort of ungrounded, I thought. And so I really made an effort to take this system called the Enneagram and ground it in childhood developmental psychology and neurobiology to really make it a more robust psychological framework tool that we could then apply to the world of finance and money to help people understand the unconscious psychological patterns or traumas that they play out in the relationship to money that trip them up. What are these archetypal patterns that I've been seeing all through my career in finance, and putting names to them and be able to name them and explain them what they are, why we have them, and then how to overcome them.
Absolutely. So let's come to the book itself, Doug. Here is the book, Taming Your Money Monster. What does the title mean here? Means help us understand.
Well, your money monster are those unconscious psychological patterns that trip you up in your finances in some area. Whether that's, I break it down into what I call the 4 pillars of finance, which are earning, saving, investing, and giving. And so what I'm trying to help people get to is to a healthy, secure relationship to money in all 4 of those aspects: earning, saving, investing, and giving, and showing them first of all, what is your personality pattern? That's the first step. And then there's sort of there's 9 archetypal personality patterns in the Enneagram system. So the Ennea means 9 in ancient Greek, and gram means drawn. So there's these 9 patterns of personality, and they're broad and they have infinite variety inside them. But they sort of explain what's your deepest unconscious fear that you developed to sort of help your ego form, and what were the greatest stressors in your childhood environment that shaped some of the core aspects of your personality. In addition, genetics plays a big factor, of course, but then in terms of the nurturing you received tends to create these unconscious wounds or your deepest fear. And that fear plays out in how you inevitably relate to money in some unhealthy ways. And the 2 key patterns I've discovered are, we can either be anxiously attached to money, in meaning we're too obsessed about it. If you think about like Ebenezer Scrooge or you think of the show Succession or Billions that are on TV now, you see these people who have wealth, but they use it in a way that is, the relationship is so unhealthy, it causes unnecessary suffering for themselves or those they love. And then on the flip side is what I call the avoidant personality, which is actually how I had to overcome that, which is that unconscious fear of money, pushing money away unconsciously, hating to do your bills or your budgets or your taxes, and really taking your financial life really seriously and taking full responsibility for it. So we can be either anxious or avoidant in one of or more of those 4 pillars I discussed earlier. And then how do you overcome that, and how does it manifest specifically for your personality type?
Right. Inside the book, what have you got inside the book?
Well, a lot. I think the compelling thing you'll find is, so I'm a visual learner, so I think in pictures first. So I like to think of it as a picture book first and foremost, and then so I have these really cool charts and graphs. And then the text kind of explains these pictures that I've drawn. These and the most helpful ones are what I call your ego map, is to actually have a detailed map of your ego structure. And it has a sort of Jungian perspective of what's your shadow structure look like for your personality type, and then what is sort of your enlightenment, or what does the higher self for you look like for your personality, and how do you get there, and how do you manifest that in your daily life, but also in your financial life. So you're living your highest values, your highest purpose through your money and through your career.
Absolutely, Doug. So who is this book for, Doug?
Well, I think it's for just about anybody who struggles with money, which is pretty much everybody in some way, shape, or form. But it really, for anybody who really wants, if you love psychology, if you have a bit of a spiritual inclination, it does require, there is a great deal of spiritual language in it, but it's ecumenical. It applies to any religious value system. It works, doesn't matter what your faith tradition is. But being able to help you grow spiritually and psychologically in your relationship to your finances. So if you really like the psychology of money, that's what this book is really all about.
Absolutely. So in a nutshell, what key message insight you want readers to take away from this book?
Well, I want them to be able to learn how to use money as a tool for the good and to build a life that makes their soul sing. How can you use money to give yourself the time, the freedom, the resources to really live your highest purpose and bring that into the world? What are your unique gifts to share with this planet while you're here? And how can your relationship with money, if it's healthy, and your material resources become that tool that you use to do good in the world?
Absolutely. So, I want to understand now. This is one book. You have other books also. Any other book that is in the pipeline? Anything else that you are doing? You want the world to know about?
Oh yeah, I probably got 5 more books bouncing around in my head. So this book, when I submitted the first draft to my publishers, it was about 150, 160,000 words, which is very long. And they said, we really want a book about 70,000 words. And so we compromised on 100. So they gave me a maximum word count of 100,000 words. So I had to cut about 50 to 60,000 words, almost a whole book worth of content, to make this readable so that people would actually, and it was a good choice. And my publishers made the right call. Thank God they reined me in. But I've got a mountain of material because the Enneagram is so complicated. You have to think of it like a fractal, like a geometric pattern that has infinite variety inside of a firm structure. So in this book, just because of necessity, we're really touching the top layer of the fractal that is the Enneagram. And there's so much more depth to it that I'm so excited to explore in the next book, which I'll hopefully get to here in the very near future.
Absolutely. There's so much to learn about your books, this book, and many other books that are yet to come. What is the best way people can get this book and also know more about you and also be updated on your forthcoming books?
Yeah. So my website, which is my name, DougLynam.com, DougLyn as in Nicholas, AM as in Michael.com. And you can find links to both of my books, to my coaching services, and I'm also an investment advisor.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of The Author's Voice with KAJ. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.